Okay, Shalom and Chodesh Tov. So first, let's start with the nightly sponsors. Let's go ahead and put this here. Nightly sponsors: Guy Mordechai for Refuah Shlema of Yona Bat Asnat. Anonymous, in honor of the happiness, health, and wealth of Daniel Shalom Ben Sarah, and for the Refuah Shlema of Menachem Mendel Ben Sarah Bat Yen Devorah Bat Rezel. And I also want to put this out there. Please don't forget to like and share so that you can participate. How are you, Mayor? Participate in the great work of the Lighthouse Project. I also want to add on one thing. For those of you who have been following the news, there's been a horrific tragedy, horrific tragedy that's been happening in the school in Coral Springs. As of right now, there's already 17 that have been proclaimed dead, and I think there are some that are still missing. To the families of the victims, there's, what can I say? I can just say that there's a reason why in our comforting at Shiva, we say, Hamokai minachem eschem. May God comfort you. Who else can comfort a person in their time of loss, and how much more so when it's a young child. But I do want to share a message also to everyone else other than the families of the victims. What's most important in these times is not to pick up a depressive sense of uselessness, purposelessness. Where's the world going? What can we really do to change this? We're just victims. It's really important that we don't take that route. Thank you. It's really important that the route we take is absolute conviction and up our conviction and commitment to our children, their education, to morality, to decency. Yes, also to become much more conscious of our surroundings, to truly be present and know what's going on around us. But God forbid, we can't let evil bring us down to depression and pointlessness, because that's all evil wants, in one form or another. The minute we get depressed, we become like putty in the hands of evil. But rather we must rise up. We must rise up and remember, in the greatest darkness, one candle alone can bring so much light. So let us commit ourselves to even stronger values, education, caring about those who we know are not well mentally, and to become conscious. With that said, which is really a little bit for a lot that should be said, but let's go into tonight's class. Okay, so tonight's class is called God's Outdoor Fun. That's what it's called. So, I read the modern day issue rather than say it by heart, maybe because it hits home more than the Kabbalistic stuff. So let's go ahead and read it. From a very young age, we come to learn that there are people who are with it and are in, and there are people who are not with it and are on the out. Our perception develops believing and feeling that those who are in have happy, full, and amazing lives, while those who are on the out live lives in which they are lonely, have to settle for less than, and live somewhat lonely, mediocre lives at best. We then carry over this paradigm of reality into our relationship with God, in which those who are on the in with God are the lucky ones, with lives filled with opportunities, luck, and blessings, while those who are on the out with God are stuck living unlucky, difficult, frustrated lives. This paradigm is actually created even by well-meaning preachers, rabbis, and parents in supporting us to walk in the ways of God so that we can be on the in with God. It never dawns on the preacher, rabbi, or parent that they are unintentionally creating an idolatry or even atheistic paradigm. Hello. Paradigm. Where was I here? Creating and this is interesting because, wow, what are we saying? That if there's an out with God, if we misbehave, that's idolatry to believe that, or that's atheism? I'm going to push that point by saying that if someone teaches a child that there is such a thing or person who can be out and separated from God, the notion of good and evil, inside and outside, does not exist within God's unconditional love and oneness with us. even though God clearly speaks of the inside, the outside, and a cause and effect relationship as well. As for me, this paradoxical relationship of there being no such thing as in and out, and yes, being such a thing as an in and out, became tangibly clear when I became a parent and experienced my fair share of being on the in and the out with my children. In this lecture, based on a mimer of the Rebbe delivered in 1986, based on a love verse of King Solomon, we will learn about the experience of unconditional love when we are on the out with God. So that's what we're here to talk about. So there's an in and there's an out. We picked that up as early as preschool. We know that we're the out kid or we're the in kid. We're the geeky, dorky kid. We're the one who doesn't get along, or we're the one who does get along. We're the one that the teacher uses a red pen for, or the teacher there, or the kid that the teacher smiles at. We've all been through this. But here we're going to talk about what it means to be in and out with God, and how do we embrace unconditional love with God when we're on the out. Okay? So, I mentioned to you that this teaching, this mimer, is going to be based on a verse, a love verse of King Solomon. King Solomon, when he was a young man, he wrote the book of songs, filled with love, inspiration, poetry. When he was on in years, that's when he wrote the book Kohelet, Ecclesiastics, kind of a depressing pre-funeral meditation. But be it as it may, the book of songs, an unbelievable book of love between the supernal couple, which happened at Mount Sinai, God and us. So let me read to you this verse from chapter 8, first verse. Oh, who would give that you were like my brother, who sucked my mother's breasts? I would find you outside, I would kiss you. That's the verse. Interesting verse. The holy mystics see this verse being connected with our Torah portion. That's why in Chabad you have many mystical discourses on this on this verse connected to our Torah portion. Why so? And the answer is because our Torah portion begins with which commandment? Va'asuli migdash v'shachanti betocham. And you shall make for me a sanctuary, and you shall dwell, and I shall dwell within them. Okay? So yeah, there's the plural, them. First and simply speaking, God is already saying that not just the tabernacle and not just the first holy temple, but also the second holy temple, and speedily in our days the third holy temple, God is telling it, you build it and I will come. Okay? So, and then it goes on to give you very, very great details of exactly what the holy temple looks like, the vessels look like, so forth and so on. So, what is the connection between this love verse of Shir HaShirim, the book of songs, and this Torah portion? So, there's actually three reasons why we say that they're connected. Number one, we will soon see that the verse is connected, this verse that I spoke to you about, who would give, that be as a brother, and then the outside, this is connected specifically to the Holy Ark, and the covering of the Holy Ark, and the cherubim which were connected to the covering of the Holy Ark. So right there is one connection with this week's Torah portion. Second connection, if you read verse 2 in chapter 8, what does it say? I will bring you to the house of my mother, which Rashi, Shlomo Yitzchaki, famous French commentator of the 11th century, the most classical and most accepted throughout all different, the entire rainbow of the Jewish people, he explains, what is the house of my mother? The Holy Temple. So right there you have another connection with this week's Torah portion. And then there's the third connection, because this entire verse is talking about how it was in the times of the Holy Temple, and thus now in exile we are yearning, and what are we saying? Oh, who would give that it should once again be like that? That deep relationship. Okay? Now, what is interesting to point out here is that in this verse you have an inside and an outside. Let's go over the verse again. Oh, who would give that you were like my brother who sucked my mother's breast? That's inside. I will find you outside. That's outside. So the verse clearly is talking about in the times of exile even, or if you want to start off with saying the inside is in the times of the Holy Temple, the outside is the times of the exile. So there's an inside and an outside. And we need to know deeper what this means. But what's more interesting is to point out that God doesn't talk about kissing those inside. Let's read the verse, the closing of the verse. What does he say? I would find you outside, I would kiss you. Interesting. On the outside, the ones who are on the outside is the ones that Hashem is saying, I will kiss you. What's going on here? We need to get a little bit more understanding here. Okay? So, let's take a moment and let us define what the inside means and what the outside means. Okay? So let's talk about this. The tabernacle in the desert and its evolution into the holy temples in Jerusalem. So just to let you know, I pretty much skipped a huge piece of our history. It didn't just go from the tabernacle in the desert to the house in Jerusalem. Between Moses passing away, Joshua entering into Israel until King David, there was a long couple of years there, a couple of centuries. So for 368 years, the temple, the tabernacle, which was still a tabernacle but did change. There was still no real roof, as in a built structured roof. There were the 3 curtains, and you can learn about them in this week's Torah portion, but the walls were no more portable beams. They were real walls. But on the other hand, there's something else to notice. What is the other thing to notice? That it developed, the Mishkan developed into the 368 years of the Mishkan Shiloh. It also had another 14 years. Then you remember King David tries to bring it down. It doesn't work out well. Right? There was the Parasha Teruma, there was a whole story where someone died, the Kohen, they reached for the holy ark that was falling, and King David saw this as a bad omen, and he left it there, and finally it's brought to Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, King David prepares the first temple, and King Solomon builds the first temple. It remains for 400 plus a couple of years, 10 years, and then you have the 70 years of exile. Then you have the second holy temple in Jerusalem, which is basically the aftermath of the story of Purim. Ezra, the scribe, who was a friend and classmate of Mordechai, the famous hero of the Megillah, and all of a sudden Esther's offspring, and from there we're allowed to build a second temple. And that stands for another 400 and plus years, longer than the first temple. Okay? Now, not very much longer, but I think one was 405, one was 410. But what happens here? This holy temple, right? What is the primary purpose of it? Let's go back to the original. Let's read a verse over here. What tells us what the real primary. Remember, I've mentioned to you a couple of times that there's an argument between 2 of the great codifiers in Jewish law. What is the most important part of the Holy Temple? On one hand, you call it the tent of testament, which means that the Holy Ark is the most important. On the other part is the place of atonement, which means the altar is the most important. But here is a verse in this week's Torah portion. When God tells us to build the Ark, He tells us to build the covering on the ark, and He tells us to make sure that from that covering there is 2 cherubim coming up, right? So then He tells, and what was in there, by the way? In there was the tablets, oh my God. There's the tablets, right? And then there's an argument whether there's also a Sefer Torah inside or it was on a shelf right next to it outside. But either way, let me read to you the verse. I will arrange my meeting with you there, God speaking to Moses, and I will speak with you from atop the ark cover, from between the 2 cherubim that are upon the ark of the testimony, all that I will command you unto the children of Israel. Okay? So, now what do we have here? If we say that the main part of the Holy Tabernacle was the place from which God says, I will talk. And in the Holy Tabernacle itself, it is in the front room, it is in the outside altar in the courtyard, it is in the inside altar, it is in the menorah, it is in the table, it's in the Holy of Holies. Within the Holy of Holies, it is the Aron Kodesh. It is on top of the Aron Kodesh, in between the 2 cherubim. Right? So then we need to look at what the Holy Ark is all about. The Holy Ark is all about the Torah. Thus we understand that the inside refers to Torah study. That's the definition of the inside. Okay? Now, I want to share with you something else. On the opening commandment of this week's Torah portion, which was the first fundraiser, it is the only fundraiser in history where the collector had to tell people, stop, you've done enough, we have enough. But what happens? It says, V'yikhu li teruma, and you shall take. In other words, Hashem is telling Moses, you shall have the Jewish people give for me a teruma. What does the word teruma mean? Donation. Now, interesting enough, there's a whole different understanding of this verse here. And you will have them take for me. There is a new interpretation in town based on the Medrash that says, not that you will have them take for me, rather you will take me. How do you take me, capital M? How does one take God? Shalom, shalom. How does one take God? The answer is through teruma. Well, what's teruma? Simply speaking, teruma is a donation. But there's another interpretation. What's the other interpretation? The other interpretation comes from the Zohar, that the word teruma spells Torah Mem. Mem is a letter in the Hebrew alphabet, and it has the numerical value of 40. Thus, what does it mean? Torah Mem, the Torah which was given from God to Moses in 40 days. So now we have a whole new definition. Not you shall take for me a donation, rather you shall take me, says God. And how do you take me? Through Torah Mem. Once again, that understanding that what does inside mean? How do you internalize? How do you take the essence of God? Is through Torah Mem, through Torah study. Okay? So too, our sages clearly say in the tractate, the first tractate of the Talmud, Barachot, it says over there, and I'll read to you, from when the holy temple was destroyed, the Holy One, blessed be He, does not have for Himself in His world, but for the 4 cubits of the study of Torah law. Not just any Torah, not just the Parasha, specifically the process of Torah, which helps us come to the conclusive halacha, law. Okay? So, I want to just share with you, more than that, the definition of the verse that comes right after our verse. Our verse that we're talking about is King Solomon's chapter 8, number 1 in the book of Songs. The verse right after that says, I bring you to the house of my mother. I told you that Rashi's commentary says the house of my mother refers to the Holy Temple. Now within the Holy Temple itself, we now understand it's all about the study of Torah. Not only was it about the Holy Torah when the Holy Temple stood, that what was in the Holy of Holies and where did God talk from in between the cherubim which was on top of the Holy Ark which housed the Torah. But even after that, from the destruction, Hashem says, I have no place for me in my world other than in the 4 cubits of Torah study. Here it goes even further, that the verse that says, I will bring you to my mother's home, but the house of my mother, there's another interpretation that says specifically that refers to the oral law. So, in many places in mysticism and Jewish Kabbalah, you will find that the written law is called father, just like the father hands over the entire DNA ladder through the sperm, but you really can't see anything until the mother internalize it, and through pregnancy she deciphers. So too you should know that every verse of the Torah is like God's sperm with the entire DNA, but you see nothing until the mother, the Talmud, the oral law dissects it. Simple example, which we all know. I'll give you 2 simple examples. Number 1, the verse just says one thing. On Shabbos you're not allowed to work. It doesn't say anywhere what work means. Another example, you shall put on your arm and your forehead tefillin. Did you see anywhere in the Torah that even says what tefillin is supposed to look like? Which portions are supposed to be in the tefillin? I can go on and on and on. It says in the verse that you're not allowed to eat unless you have shchita. Does it say anywhere in the Torah what are the do's or dies of shchita? This is all in the Talmud, the Menachos. We learn out that there's 5 laws, and how do we know it? So in other words, when we talk about the extrapolation, the Talmudic taking the verses and coming down to actual halakha, that's the process of my mother's home. That's the process of the oral law. That's the process of coming to conclusive definition of law. By the way, I want to tell you how serious this is. There were Jews that didn't like the Talmud because the Talmud argues with the Torah. Simple case. The Torah says an eye for an eye. The Talmud says it doesn't mean an eye for an eye. It means you have to pay money. Let's even get more serious here. The verse says you should place your tefillin between your eyes and on your hand, not on your arm, and not by your hairline. There were Jews that wanted to do that. We know that between your eyes means not here and not here, but it has to be here. We know that on your hand, tefillin shel yad, this is the only part that's called yad. This is called zroah. It's your arm. But without the oral law, we would not know what the law is. Thus Moses had to teach in the 13 rules of extrapolation, so forth and so on. According to Rabbi Shmuel, there's 13 laws. There's more according to another opinion. Okay? So that's why it's called the mother's house. So one thing we do have clear here. The definition of inside in the service of God is called Torah study. That's where you digest, that's where you internalize. Okay? So in general you should know that throughout the Talmud and the Zohar, we refer to the Torah as bread. Something you eat, you digest, it becomes your flesh and blood. It becomes one with you. That becomes your paradigm. Okay? Now, let's go further. What is the definition of outside? Okay, the definition of outside. I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I didn't skip anything. I don't know why my head is so busy with that. I don't know why. My head is very busy with what happened with those teenagers. Anyway, the definition of the outside is what? The definition of the outside is then being outside of the house of prayer, the house of Torah study. What does that mean for a Jew? That means doing good deeds. The Jewish person who is a businessman, who's a professional, has more opportunity to do mitzvot than the rabbi who's in the shul. So the inside refers to Torah study and prayer, and the outside refers to those who do good deeds, but they're outside of the house of God, i.e. the house of prayer and the house of study. They're in their office, they're on business trips, they're in restaurants, but throughout that, they're consistently doing good deeds. Okay? So, that is a simple understanding of inside and outside, the way it reflects in the service of the people. Now, just as you know that Torah is the wisdom and will of God, God is infinite, His wisdom is infinite, and His will is infinite, so too you will understand that the inside and the outside has layers upon layers upon layers. And we're going to talk about that. Okay? Okay, now, with all this said, let's go for the list of the mystical concepts we need to explore in order to understand this lecture. Number 1, God is with him. Number 2, brotherly cherubim. Number 3, Yisachar and Zvulun, 2 of the 12 sons of Jacob, which become 2 of the 12 tribes of Israel. Words versus kissing. And then lastly, kiss me outside. And now let the amazement of Chassidus begin. Okay, what does it mean God is with me? So let us explore why it is I mentioned to you clearly that we spoke about that once the holy temple is destroyed, God says, I have nowhere for me in my universe other than in the 4 cubits, not of Torah study, but specifically Shel Halacha, the Torah study of law. Why is it specifically like that? So number 1, I want to share with you very clearly that many yeshivot are not focused on this. I'm not here to complain. It's a famous thing. There's the Brisker group started this whole pilpul, and that became very dominant in most yeshivas. And what is pilpul? It's sharpening. It's that sharpening of the head of extrapolation upon extrapolation and splitting hairs, going deeper and deeper. And every time you think, oh, well, you could say this, but 1 second you could say that, a question, an answer, a connection. That's the way it goes. That became a very mainstream in many yeshivas. However, I will tell you that Reb Shalom Dov Ber of Lubavitch, who was the Rebbe, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, who founded the organized yeshiva of Lubavitch, he specifically put together certain pamphlets of discourses for the yeshiva students, the famous Tamimim, and he writes there clearly, he does not want that in his yeshiva. He wants that his yeshiva should be focused when studying the oral law. It's called Shmaitasa Aliba de Hilchasa. Everything has to reach a conclusive, so what do? What's the law? Okay? I'm not going to mess with all the great work that people are doing, but I will share with you that that's one of the pluses you have in the Steinsaltz Talmud. One of the pluses you have in the Steinsaltz Talmud is that on the bottom, he clearly leads you to the code of Jewish law based on this piece of Talmud, so that you can get the actual, okay, so we just had an amazing intellectual experience. Bottom line, that's what it's all about. So I want to share with you what a simple story, just a simple story. I'm not telling you a story of 20 generations ago. This is a story of a man that I knew, of blessed memory, the former rabbi of Kfar Chabad in Israel. Kfar Chabad, not far from the airport, the Ben Gurion airport. So the Rav of that place was a man of blessed memory by the name of Rabbi Mordechai Ashkenazi, who was the son of a rabbi, a Chabad rabbi, in Bnei Brak. The father comes once to yeshiva in Kfar Chabad and is looking for his son. Where's his son? Mind you, just to understand what goes on in Chabad, the humility. He made sure he was known as not Mordechai, Rabbi Mordechai, Mati Ashkenazi. I mean, the guy's a giant. He wrote books in law. I mean, but anyway, be it as it was, this man, his father was looking for him. He was a yeshiva boy. They can't find him. Where's the yeshiva boy? Till finally they found him. He broke into the kitchen. I want to point out to you what met their eyes when they walked into the kitchen. Here was a young bacher sitting with Shulchan Aruch Chelik Yeridea, Code of Jewish Law. Specifically, there's 4 books, and he was holding the book of Yeridea open. Where in Yeridea was he holding it open? To the laws of Taruvas, the laws of mixtures. He was standing there with one of the yeshiva's big army pots. He was holding there one of the yeshiva's big ladles. And he was literally role-playing, law by law, of what happens when a dairy ladle was used in a meat pot. That's what we're talking about. That is a total different type of learning than what you have in many yeshivas. Yes, driven to Jewish law. I want to take it a step further. There's a saying in the yeshiva world: if you want a conclusive answer in Jewish law, never ask a Rosh Yeshiva. Why never ask a Rosh Yeshiva? Because the Rosh Yeshiva's mind is trained never to reach a final conclusive decision. Because there's always so much more extrapolations. But what if? But maybe you can say, you'll never get there. He's splitting hairs and splitting the split here, and goes on and on and on. That's the training of that type of mind. On the other hand, the rabbi, no matter what he's learning, if he's geared to be a rabbi, I don't mean a rabbi we call today, the man who sits and gives sermons. I'm talking about the man whose job it is to answer, is this kosher, is this not kosher? You're allowed to do some Shabbos, you're not allowed to do it. You're allowed to do this infertility procedure, you're not allowed to. I mean, there's huge questions. He is trained that no matter what he's learning, he's always looking for the conclusive decision of the law. So what's the Jewish law about this? A total different type of learning. Now that you understand that within the oral law itself, there's so many different paths. I just gave you 2 paths. There's homiletics, there's drush, there's numerology. I mean, you can go on and on. But I gave you the 2 major ways that they're learning in yeshivas today. Now you understand that there's difference within the house of the mother, the oral law itself, but yet it's clearly saying that where we're talking about the inside is specifically in the study which leads to conclusive law. The question is why? Why? You get a mitzvah of studying Torah, any piece of Torah you study. You study a medrash. You study the Parasha. Nothing about law there. It's the furthest thing from law. Number one, you're not allowed to pass a verdict from a medrash. And number two, you cannot pass a verdict from a verse without being totally fluent with the Mishnah. Like I just gave you an example. Imagine you asked a kid in school who's just beginning to learn Chumash, what do you do? Johnny just knocked out Bill's eye. Oh, you knock out Johnny's eye. You can't do that. But they're all holy. They're all the mitzvah. All these spiritual things that go on when you study Torah, it's happening. But no. The main focus is going to be the inside happens specifically when you're studying Jewish law. Why? So now we're going to get into the mystical understanding of why. So I want to share with you. You probably all heard this famous story, told all over the places. Rabbis love this until it got to the internet. Now everyone knows it and we can't use it no more. In general, you got to give us rabbis credit for any joke we come up with today's internet. But be it as so. The rabbi is sitting in his house. In comes Yaakov. Rabbi, Yosef and I, we had a disagreement. The rabbi looks at Yaakov and says, yeah, Yaakov, you're right. Yosef comes not 10 minutes later. Rabbi, I want to tell you what really happened between Yosef and Yaakov. The rabbi listens to him and tells him, Yosef, you're right. After which, the Rebbetzin, the rabbi's wife, says, my dear husband, how can Yaakov be right and Yosef be right? He looks at her and says, you're right. As much as this is a joke, this is what the Torah is all about. Thus you have throughout the entire teachings, the Talmud, arguments. Hillel says lenient, Shammai says stringent, over and over and over and over. Right? You have it all the rabbis. You have Rish Lakish, Rabbi Yechon, you have the famous peers, the duos. You have Rav and Shmuel. And yet the question is, 1 second. So one is right and one is wrong. One said permissible. One said prohibited. Who's right? So I want to read to you a statement in the Talmud. It is unbelievable what the statement says. This is, by the way, in the Talmud Tractate Eruvin. 3 years they argued. I'm quoting, by the way. 3 years they argued, the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai. These said the law is like us, and these said the law is like us. Came forth a heavenly voice and said, these and these are the words of the living God, and the law is like the house of Hillel. Very interesting here. First he said, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. These and these are the words of the living God. There's no right and there's no wrong. And nevertheless, the law is like Hillel. So much so that for those of you who started ever learning Talmud, right smack in the beginning of the Talmud, in the beginning of Brachot, when we talk about in what position you have to say the Shema Yisrael in the morning and at night, came along a Rab Tarfon and said, I know that Hillel says you could do it anyway, but I wanted to be extra careful, and I did it the way Shammai says. But because I was doing it leaned over, and I was on a way in the forest, and there were a bandit over there, a bunch of bandits over there, and you should know I almost got killed. And they told him, you deserve to have been killed. Because the rule is like Hillel, so don't be an Ibechuchem and try to do like Shammai. Amazing. But 1 second, they're both the words of the living God. But the law is like Hillel. Which leaves the Talmud to ask the same question. 1 second. If these and these are the words of the living God, then why are we saying that we follow Hillel? So look what the Talmud answers. The Talmud gives a reason. Because the house of Hillel was kindly and modest, they studied their own rulings and those of the house of Shammai, and were even so humble as to mention the actions in the house of Shammai before they mentioned their own. You think, hey, party line. No. We have to know what Shammai says. And before we even understand what we hold, we're going to first discuss them and fully understand them. That was Hillel, the humble one who never got angry. Famous story the Talmud tells us of someone who made a bet that he can get Hillel angry, and he tried and tried and tried, and he told Hillel that I just lost money because of you. And Hillel answered, may you lose much more money before Hillel gets angry. Angry is arrogance and ego. The house of Hillel was focused on humility and kindness. That's why the law was there. 1 second. You can be so kind and so good-hearted. We're talking about law. We're talking about what seems to be do or die. You're either right or you're not right. Or, even if you're going to say that you can proceed beyond that, which is a big problem, because in the binary code of the people who work on a binary code, there's got to be a right and there's got to be a wrong. It's not enough that I'm right. I need to also know that the person who argues with me is wrong. But that's not the way it is in the infinite world of intellect. But 1 second, what's the fact that he's kind and this and that? Let me ask you a question. I mean, just put it out there. If someone you know and love needs to have a surgery, you want a kind doctor or a good doctor? There's a kind doctor who's a shlemazel, and there's a good doctor who may have very nasty bedside manners. We're talking about Jewish law here. Why is the verdict like him? To understand this, we need to understand another secret. This secret is a very big problem, and most people don't pay attention to it. Make a blessing. Hashem Elokim, Hebrew, suffix im is what? Masculine plural. How can you have a name of God which is plural? You have the same 7 famous names. There are actually 10 famous names. And what? One of them is plural. Only one. Elokim. How do you have a plural name for God? We need to understand this, because when the Talmud says these and these are the words of the living God, it doesn't say the ineffable tetragrammaton. It doesn't say Kale. It says Elokim. There's something here. To understand the secret of how we can have a name of God which is said in plural, we need to go to the secret of the menorah described in this week's Torah portion. The menorah had what? 1 center branch from which came out 6. The middle one was the center branch, right? So you have a total of 7 equal height candles, light, right? What does that really mean? What that really means is that the infinite light shines through primarily 7 different emotion emanations. The first branch in the menorah is called a branch of kindness, chesed, the first of the emotion emanations. The second one is gevura, which is strength, strictness, justice. The third one is tiferes, which is defined as compassion, and it goes on and on and on. Hillel's soul, we know, comes from the first branch. The source, as it came down, went through, it manifested itself through the emanation of kindness. Therefore, you know, and by the way, let's first say this, and Shammai came from the second branch. What do we know? A simple story. A Gentile comes over to Shammai and says, teach me the Torah on 1 foot and I'll convert. And Shammai pushes him out. Sorry. We can't do that. You can't have conversion for the sake of the all-encompassing spirituality. You need to focus on the strict justice laws to do and not to do. It's not just about to be or not to be. Sorry, I can't convert you. The same one comes to Hillel. What does Hillel do? Hillel, in his power of kindness, he's able to connect to this individual and give him that one all-encompassing which goes through all the details. He gives him what he wants. Stand up on 1 foot. I'll give you the all-encompassing soul of the Torah, which expresses itself in every detail of all the 613 commandments. And what is that? Kindness. What you don't want done to you, don't do unto others. There were 2 different souls. Thus you understand that in the world of kindness, Hillel is right. In the world of strength, strictness, and justice, Shammai is right. Thus, where can you have that two antithetical opinions are both right? Only in the name Elokim. What does the name Elokim represent? The name Elokim represents the way the infinite light manifests itself in the vessels of the 10 emanations. Thus there is the light of kindness now, and thus there is the light of strictness. Thus we say that Hillel in the realm of the light of kindness is right. It's the words of God. Shammai in the realm of the light of strictness, strength, and justice is right. But that only works with the name Elokim, which is plural. Because we're talking about not the infinite light as it stands in its own self. We're talking about the way it shines through and manifests itself within the 7 different branches. And because there are different branches, what's right here is wrong there, what's right here is wrong there. No. Now that we understand, according to the teachings of Kabbalah, the first part of the statement, Eilu ve'eilu divrei Elokim chayim, these words and these words are the words of the living Elokim. Now let's understand the second half. But the halacha, the law, is like the house of Hillel. And as I quoted to you in the opening, the boy just starts learning Mishnah and he already hears how strict it is that the law is like Hillel. Don't do like Shammai. By the way, I want to just throw this out there, parenthetically speaking. You should know that when Mashiach comes, the law is going to be like Shammai. And if you want to know how that works, it's because today we say Magen Avraham. Avraham is kindness. You should know that when Mashiach comes, we're going to say to Yitzchak, Ata Avinu. What is Yitzchak? Strictness. So just that you should know, I'm just throwing this out there as extra credit. You should just know, not in my notes. But you should know that because today we cannot stand in the face of perfection, we need Hillel, and we cannot sustain Shammai. But when Mashiach comes and there won't be no more of contractions, concealments, and all these evil temptations, we will be able to rise up to Yitzchak and therefore Shammai. Okay? But let's go further. What about Hillel's humility connects him to where that makes the halacha like him? The fact that Shammai is absolutely right, we get it. But there's something about Hillel, and the Talmud gives us an insight that you get there through the humility, but obviously he reaches a name of God, he reaches a greater revelation in which it's not about the 7 branches, but about that one infinite light prior. Where's that? For that we're going to have to go to the Talmud in Sanhedrin, page 93. Did I say that right, or did I just make that up? Yeah, 93. 93b. And what does it say there? It says, and the ineffable tetragrammaton, Yud He Vav He, and I'm going to say Havaya. That's the way Chabad Chassidim say the name. Hashem just means the name. But when you want to get close, just say the letters, you say Havaya. That's the way it works in Chassidus. And Havaya Imoy, and Havaya, the ineffable tetragrammaton, is with him, for the law is like him. Aha. So to enter into the world of truth, you just got to be Elokim level. But if you want that you should be the one, that the law is like you, then you have to connect, open up, not to the Elokim level, but to the ineffable tetragrammaton level. The divinity, the infinite light, not the way it shines specifically through this one or that one. Okay? Now, what is this ineffable tetragrammaton? I'll tell you what it is. What was the verse that we said from our week's Parsha? That where did God give the law from? There was the infinite divine presence, which was in the Holy of Holies, upon the ark, between the 2 cherubim. That which was there was not Elokim. That was the ineffable tetragrammaton. Thus you now understand the connection to inside is not just studying a Torah which is true on the Elokim level, but to become connected to the infinite light, the essence, the way it is in the Holy of Holies, upon the ark, within the 2 cherubim. Now, within studying Torah itself, what's the difference between the two? That's what the Gemara tells us. There's a difference if you study Torah with absolute humility and transparency. That's a difference. Now, Hillel couldn't agree to Shammai, because if you understand the Torah this way, you can't be nice. I don't want to make him feel bad. I'll tell him he's right. Okay, guys, prohibited. You can't do that in Torah. If you believe that the Torah tells you it's lenient, you got to say permissible. But even though he felt that, he made sure that in his yeshiva they study what Shammai says. They study what Shammai says first. And then say, but we perceive it this way. That humility, that totally, it's not about me. That is what connects us not to just the Elohim level, which was what was going on in the Holy Temple in general, but to the ineffable Tetragrammaton, of which God says, and I will from there speak to you and give you the laws for the children of Israel. Now we understand even deeper. Follow what's going on here. Within the names of God, there's an inside and an outside. If you have plurality, if you have dualism, how much more so sevenism, then you're dealing with the outside. So within the names of God, Elohim is outside, and the ineffable Tetragrammaton is inside. Within the study of Torah itself, within the study of the oral Torah, the house of my mother, there's an inside and an outside. Within inside, there's an inside and an outside. The outside is to study on the level of Elohim. The inside is to have total transparency to the Word of God, total humility, and then you reach the ineffable Tetragrammaton. By the way, I just want to throw this out there. I was not able to look this up, but I recall there's a statement somewhere that says that one doesn't merit to have the law like him until he fails in that area. Mm-hmm. Interesting. What happens when you fail? There's that brokenness. The earthen heart becomes flesh and soft. No, now we know what we're talking about. But again, I did not have a chance to look it up where it says that. So, okay. Let's go further then. Now we understand that. Now I want to share with you a little bit mystical. So far it's making sense, even though we got mystical with the names. I want to share with you another mysticism, which is interesting. We've been talking about this for the last 3 classes. It kept on coming up in these teachings. We talk about Eden, the inside, the river that comes forth, the outside. What that simply means is that when we talk about in the realm of worlds, inside is Atzilut. So I want to, you mentioned to me, we've got to make it practical, right? So I want to share with you. When we talk about spirituality, I don't care how spiritual any one of us believes we are, it's abstract. I can tangibly tell you what pizza looks like and tastes like. I have an abstract notion, emanations, it's time to make sense. It's abstract. In the world of Atzilut, it's the exact opposite. Spirituality is tangible. You eat pizza, they eat emanations. That's tangible. That's their environment. They extrapolate, one second, God gave the Torah not here. He gave it down there. So what would this mean down there? And they kind of hypothesize abstractly. Well, what exactly is a migui? What does it mean that a person would lie? Why would a person lie? But they don't get that. The inside is the world of Atzilut, divinity. The outside is the other 3 worlds we spoke about: creation, formation, and action. Because that already has separation, identity, ego, and action. So now you understand that within the worlds, there's the inside, which is absolute transparency and oneness to God. And then there's the outside. The outside feels a separation. Of course, I need God. I am an I. And I need God for my sustaining. But I am I. Okay? Let's even get deeper than that. Within the inside of Atzilut, even within the inside of Atzilut, the first 9 emanations is called inside. because they're all about the light of Atzilut. Remember what we spoke about in the last two classes, that the 10th emanation is kingship. What's the job of the mystical feminine mystique? The kingship of the upper world descends and becomes the crown of the lower world. That means within the world of Atzilut already, what are you focused on? Are you in here with us, or is your job to bring this down there? If your job is to bring this down there, even though now you're here and you're with us, but everything to you is about there. The giver has to focus on the receiver, not on himself. Thus Malchut, even at the 10th emanation of the inside world, really is considered outside. Why is it important to know this? Why does the Rebbe do this for us? Because if you really follow what the Rebbe is doing, he's explaining you the evolution from the inside to the outside, because it really all begins on the inside. If the teacher doesn't have within his mind the student, then the student has no connection. Thus, really you understand everything that we call outside or exists in its higher plane in the inside. So there's a reason why the Rebbe is doing this. He's not just splitting hairs for us for the, let me just tell you, you think this is inside? Well, within this inside is outside. Within that inside, it is a reason for this. Because the job of Chassidus in its deepest sense is faith in God. Faith in God is not that there is a God who's in control. The real faith in God of Hero Israel, God is one. God is our God, God is one. The real definition of Jewish monotheism is not that there's only one God. It's that God is everything and everything is God. Thus, the outside is not an outside. Because if it's God, there is no outside. Going back to what I said in the opening, when teachers teach a kid, you're going to be at the outside of God, and you're not going to get the blessings. There is no outside, ultimately. Because when we do what the Rebbe just did for us here, we realize that the outsides exist within the inside, and within that inside is an out, and it goes higher and higher. Until you get within the infinite light, there's an outside and an inside. No, the outside of the infinite light is not so outside. You follow? Yeah. I lost you there? We're okay? Okay. Yeah, that's why we do that. By the way, I tell this to people, because that's the way I experience it with my teachers. My class started when my teacher's class finished. He prepared his class, and he said it. I just heard it for the first time. So my class wasn't over. My class first started. What in the world is he talking about? I just share with you the same thing. I sat and prepared and looked up, and then thank God for Rabbi Google who helped me out. That's what happened. But you're first hearing it now, so of course, your class begins. Okay, let's go further then. Now, when we hear about the outside and the inside, and that really they're all within the inside, this leads us to another interesting, powerful statement. Why? Because ultimately speaking, to the essence, the inside and the outside are both the same. Right? That's what we're getting at. So, now let's talk about why the verse refers to it as, what was the exact words? Who would be my brother? What's the exact words? Mi yitencha, who would give that you be as my brother who nursed from my mother's breast. What's the brothers here? Well, King Solomon is very poetic, but what does he mean? What does he mean brothers? Now I'm going to share with you that the secret is the cherubim. Why the secret the cherubim? Because the keruvim, that's the Hebrew word for it, the keruvim, when the Talmud wants to know what is a keruv, it says kravya means a face. It means a human face. The cherubim with the wings, but the face was of a human face, a human child. The Talmud asks a question, but 1 second, how can you say that? So he says, very simple. One is a small face, and one is a big face. Now, simply speaking, we're not talking about the sizes of the faces. You ever saw pictures? I've never seen anyone draw that. You want to say that this is the face of a child, this is the face of an adult. In Kabbalah, it has deeper meanings. What it means is that the keruv, which was on one end of the kapoiris, which was the covering. So just that you know, the box had an open top, right? If you want me to just quickly share with you exactly what you're going to hear the Shabbos in Shul, you have the gold box, inside the wood box, inside a gold box. So all you saw was gold, but gold is not sturdy, so you have the wood, which makes it sturdy. On top of that, you had a lid. From that lid came the two cherubim. So it says that on one end of the cheruv and on the other end of the cheruv, there were two that faced each other. The one end of cherubim, according to mystical teachings, is the 6 male emotions, which what I told you was their experience is to be within the greatness of Atzilut. On the other end, there is the 10th emanation, the 7th female, the 7th emotion, the feminine emotion, which is kingship, which its job was to descend into the lower worlds. Now you understand, mystically speaking, why this is called the great face and why this is called the small face. Because this lives within the greatness of Atzilut, spiritual oneness inside, and this one's job is to go down into the lower outside. What I want to share with you here is, and let's stop moving a little quicker, sorry about that, but what I want to share with you is that both of these two keruvim have to be on the cover. Not just on the cover. It's part and parcel of the cover. They were actually connected to the cover. What does that mean to us? The cover in Kabbalah language is called a chuppah. What's the job of the chuppah? You have the man, the 6 male emotions. You have, he is the greater face because he's supposed to live in the world of Torah. And what happens with the second one, the bride? She's called the smaller face because her job is kingship. Give it over to the next generation. Lower yourself to the next generation. And upon that there's a chuppah. What's the job of the chuppah? The chuppah is to cover them both equally. You're not so great, you're not so small, because in my face of the infinite chuppah, you're both equal. Thus we have to have these two keruvim connected to that one all-encompassing cover of the ark. Thus you now understand from that perspective, from that covering in which God says, I will talk to you, I will meet with you, from the space, that covering space between the keruvim, what are we talking about? We're talking about that level of essence, which the big and the small, the inside and the outside are all equal. They're all part of Hashem's everythingness. Thus we now understand what the verse is saying. The verse is saying both. You should know that this cherub over here, which is what? Which is like the one who nursed from my mother's breast, inside. And this one who I'm going to have to go outside and find, the bandit, the secular one. You should know that they're both equally yearning for the oneness of God. How can they both be yearning equally? Really? This rabbi who never let his eyes see anything other than the holy pages of the Holy Torah. You know, in history there were people like that. Not that long ago. There were people that they had to be walked home because they used to cover their eyes not to see anything, just from the shul to the house. They literally lived like that. Mind you, just want to tell with you a story that we don't know from Lubavitch. We know the story from the outside of Lubavitch, the famous Rabbi Luvabitcher of blessed memory. He revealed to us that when the Rebbe walked in Paris, he always walked with a newspaper in front of him, and he saw there was one hole here. The Rebbe didn't want to see the way people were dressing in Paris. That was a different perspective. The Rebbe did make eye contact, but he didn't need to see what he didn't need to see. What he had to deal with, he had to deal with. So there's that holiness. You're going to tell me that the person who sits all day and his job as a college student is to be a bartender. Chaim Yankel, the bartender. You're going to tell me that that outside has the same equal yearning and revelation of the inside? Oh yeah, if you're just looking at the keruvim, no. There's a big face and there's a small face. But if you're looking from the golden roof from which everything comes, the essence of God, of course, the essence of this one's soul and the essence of this one's soul, the unconditional oneness is equal for the one on the inside the house of Torah study and for the secular businessman who has to deal with all the issues that you have to deal with, from Wall Street to the court to whatever else you're doing for a living. And both of them, as a Jew, yearn for the good old days where we can have the holy temple and be one with Hashem. Enough with this whole chazarai. They both equally have that. Why do they equally have that? Now go back to the verse. The verse doesn't talk about the one who sucks from my mother's breast. It doesn't talk about the outside. First it says, my brother. What is he telling us, King Solomon? Brother, I mean the cheruvim. What does the Keruvim do? It makes both as brothers equal. This Kerub of the big face, spiritually. This Kerub of the small face, spiritually. Both are part and parcel of the oneness of Hashem, the covering from which they come. Equally. Okay? Now you'll understand why in the teaching of the Torah, based on a verse in Deuteronomy, when Moses blesses the 12 tribes, he says, rejoice, Zvulun, in your going out, and Yisachar in your tents. Rashi explains, what tents? Yisachar used to sit in the tents of Torah. Yisachar would have famous scribes. Yisachar would have famous judges. They came from the tribe of Yisachar. Zvulun happened to live on the ports. Besides that, the Talmud tells us that they were blessed that within their lot was very precious white glass, and there was other stuff going on there. They were in the export business. And Yisachar and Zvulun made a deal. What was the deal they made? I'll support you in your learning, and you allow half your study to be for me. So there definitely is the inside and the outside. In the realm of Jews, we don't talk about it as two tribes. We talk about it as the entire people. What is your job? What do you do for a living? Are you a Zvulunik or are you a Yisacharnik? Mind you, I want to just put it out there. This is this whole problem that the Zvuluns thought that the Yisachars are just living off the government, and the Yisachars thought, you secular Jews, if it was up to you, we wouldn't even have an Israel. This was before that whole, that's all garbage. In the real world, Yisachar and Zvulun were two loyal, loving brothers, and they knew that you have to have an inside and an outside. I'll take care of the outside, and you'll take care of the inside. But listen to what the verse does. I mentioned this to you in the beginning of the class. Who is God kissing? Yisachar or Zvulun?
Both.
Nope. What does the verse say? No. The Zvulun, the outside. I would find you outside and I would kiss you. 1 second. Why is God kissing the Zvulun more than the Yisachar? Shouldn't he be kissing the Yisachar? Shouldn't he be kissing the insides and not the outside? Mind you, this is not in the mimer, but I want to share with you. Did you listen to the verse I just told you? Who does it say first? Rejoice Zvulun first, then Yisachar. Even in the verse, not just King Solomon. Even in the verse it points out Zvulun prior to Yisachar. What are you saying here? What are you saying here? The outside Jews? The ones that are in the street all day, dealing with everything that's not Jewish? They're the ones? Yes. Because ultimately speaking, the Jewish people are divided into two tribes. And I don't mean divided in that sense. I mean, there are those that study Torah, and there are those that are doing mitzvahs. That's the end of the story. There are those in downtown who's going to tell a person, I'm not giving you money because I don't know what habits you have, but if you go into the store with me, I'll pay for your sandwich. Those are the Jews that are the outsides, good deeds. And then you have the Jews who don't even get to meet those people. They're sitting inside. Just tell you a cute story. I know it's getting late. I'll tell you a cute story. There was a rabbi, one of the most famous rabbis in Jewish law. And the woman brought to him a piece of the chicken, which had a pin in it, which means that that piece was punctured, which means is it kosher or is it not kosher? So the rabbi looked at it and asked the woman, what is this? And she said, Rabbi, this is the kurkuvin. The holy kurkuvin? To him, the kurkuvin was hours of Torah study. He didn't know that he did know, but he never saw the chicken's kurkuvin. Two different worlds. This woman wanted to know, Rabbi, does God let me eat this or not? This rabbi that's the kurkuvin? The ones that the Rambam and the Rashba and the Rosh, they're arguing. This is not no small issue, the kurkuvin. He wants to know if she washed her hands before she touched this kurkuvin and the holy laws. Two different worlds. But which one does God kiss? The one on the outside. Which one's mentioned first in the pasuk? Zvulun, the outside. To understand this, we need to understand what is a kiss. Torah is the words of God. You're studying and becoming one with the words of God. Within the words are what? If I can talk about it, that means it's expressible. So let's talk about a kiss. What is a kiss? Here's something interesting. Let's talk about tears. Why do people cry? Now, there's so many different reasons, right? There's tears of joy. There's tears of pain. There's tears of sorrow. There's tears of longing. There's tears of awe. You just sit there like, wow, what's going on? It's very simple what's going on. What's going on is that as long as the emotion is containable, finite, I can express it with logical words. When it's gone beyond my capacity, when the essence, intensity of my emotions are kicking in, I can't talk. So too with love. The true kiss that King Solomon says in chapter 1, verse 1 of the Book of Songs. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. He's talking about the essence, intensity of love which burst forth. That does not happen to the Torah study. That happens to the one out there in the street doing Hashem's good deeds. Because Torah study, by definition, is intellectual. It has to be graspable. The entire job of the human mind is divide and conquer. That's how it works. That's how we understand things. Break it down, break it down, break it down, break it down, until you can truly digest it intellectually in your brain. That's the Word of God. That's the revelation of the Word of God. The finite, logical revelation. But when you're talking about kiss, you're talking about an intense burst. Uncontrollable. That's what King Solomon is talking about. That type of yearning, that type of experience for God doesn't happen in the house of study or the house of prayers. That happens out there. Now the question is going to be, why? So I want to just share with you clearly the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya in chapter 45 that there is a state of learning Torah of called Yichud Elyon, the higher unity, in which he refers to this verse of King Solomon of kiss, let him kiss me on the kiss of my lips. And he says that refers to the teaching in the Zohar, the connection, the cleaving of spirit to spirit. So in Torah study it does exist, but for those who are capable to do the higher union. King Solomon says to everyone who's outside, if you're doing good deeds, you're experiencing kiss of God, not just the words of God. Okay? So now, we need to understand why. So I'm going to hypothesize here. I did not see that the Rebbe clearly explained it in this mimer, but I will go ahead and hypothesize from other teachings 3 reasons why I think the outside ones are the ones to get the kiss and not the inside ones. So I did express to you that the Torah study is words, but I didn't express to you why the kiss is the outside. So I'm going to share with you a couple of things. Number 1, we just spoke about what? Emotions that you can contain. They're not essence. They're not the essence intensity. You can express logically. The ones that are bubbling over, the essence intensity which is uncontainable, it happens through action, tears, kiss. Thus, I would like to hypothesize, therefore, those who are working in the world of action are connecting with that essence intensity that's expressed only through action. One thought. Another thought. We're taught in Chassidus that the soul has a continuous flow of love and yearning for God. What happens when you build a dam? It's building. It's building. It's building. The current is building until it bursts forth. So too it is. The soul that is in the shul, that's continuously letting out a healthy current of love, doesn't build. The one that's nebech all over the place in the outside world, dealing with all the stuff that's on the outside world of ego and separation and desire and temptation, his soul has a huge dam. And it's building and it's building and it's building. And he needs that spirituality. He bursts forth with, let me just find someone to give charity to. Someone to help. Let me do a good deed. That's a burst forth, which is kiss. There's a third explanation I'd like to share with you. and that's the end of this part of the class, then we'll go to the closing. In Kabbalah, all of spirituality comes from the revelation of the infinite light, including Torah study and what lies in the Torah. It's spiritual, it's revelation. The one thing that cannot come from light, spirituality, is physical. You can't subdivide a light until it turns into a lump of clay. Therefore, you have to know that while all of spirituality came forth from and is sustained by the infinite light, the physical lump of clay has to come from the essence of God, not the spiritual infinite light of God. Thus, the ones that are working not in the spiritual comfort of the shul and the spirituality of Torah study and prayers, but those that are out there in the lumps of clay, building brick by brick the world for God, those are the ones that get the kiss. So, we became very clear here. There's an inside and an outside. Spiritually speaking, not only is the outside nebuch, but by the time you finish learning Chassidus, you feel sorry for the rabbis and you adore the business people. These are the people out there that are working for God. They're the ones that are getting kissed by God. They're the ones that are seeing the divine providence of God. They're the ones that are bringing God to the world. The other ones are the think tanks that enjoy themselves in shul with a hot coffee and a Gemara. So we understand that. Not so. Hashem, there's no inside, there's no outside. There's two kindalach. One's going to sit inside and learn the Jewish law. The other one's going to be outside and do the work. And you should know that I have an infinity, says God, to the ones outside. There's where my kiss takes place. Let's wrap it up. Wow, it's late. Let's go back to the opening. And again, I'm going to get very physical and very practical here. We talk about those who grow up being in and those who grow up being out. And I'm talking about socially now. I'm talking about practically. Right? There's the quarterback and the cheerleader, and then there's, you know, the one that's still wearing the 60s bell bottoms. They're just a little out of it. The geeks. There's the inside and there's the outside. The fact is that those who were gifted to be on the inside all their life never really search within themselves to find their essence in their powers. I'm going to share with you a little story that I didn't put in here because I was running late, but there's a story about this farmer that just planted his little saplings, and it starts raining with a wind and everything, and the other guy tells the farmer, oh my God, I feel sorry for you. These little saplings, I mean, it would be nice if they would have had a little nice weather, work it out. I said, no. If they would have had nice weather, they wouldn't have forced themselves to have big roots. And then later, when they're older, it's too late and they would have been blown over. Extremely blessed am I that right now the weather is causing them to fight for survival, so they have to dig deep within their resources. So too it is with the human being. Those who were, forgive me, I'm going to be very open here, the females that got away just with their good looks never had to dig deep within themselves to find their deeper inner powers. Life was easy. And I'm not talking about the ones that were just busy, vanity. I'm talking about the ones that did their homework, they did their schoolwork, they did their work of being a mensch, they did their community work. I'm not talking about the bums. I'm talking about the ones that, but the bottom line is that they were gifted with external beauty or class or just a way with themselves and a charisma. They never had to dig deep within themselves, nor did they have to dig deep into their relationship with God. It was sweet and easy. Those of us who were stuck on the outside and sat in the cafeteria with the other outsidenicks had no choice but to break far beyond the upper soil of the soul. We're forced to dig deep roots into ourselves to find out who we are and what God wants from us. These outsiders had to find a real deep relationship with a God who created them, who saw the them that no one else obviously saw, loved them unconditionally, and guided them. The inniks didn't have to do that. The outniks had no choice but to truly find where God kisses. Nothing less was enough for them. They had no choice. There's a saying, which school did you graduate? The school of hard knocks. A total different school. I will share with you that quite often, those who were on the in their youth and through life, when the cruelty of life kicks in, they sometimes falter. Those who are on the out, who sit and get kissed by God because they searched it, not out of want, but out of need to survive in the outside, are the ones that are most deepest connected to Hashem. Thank you.